You're listening to The White Rabbit, conversations on the art of presenting in a rather noisy world. Your hosts are Matt Krause and Alper Rosales. Matt helps leaders of international companies speak, write, and present with confidence. Alper is a communications trainer and a startup investor with a diverse portfolio of companies in Barcelona. If you like this podcast, please share it with friends and colleagues. Now, on to Matt and Alper for today's conversation.
Alper, today we have a guest on the podcast, and before we get started with that, I've got to say a little disclaimer. I am horribly jet lagged, and I have recently had a death in the family. I'm horribly jet lagged. I just stepped off the plane like a few hours ago, and I'm also horribly dehydrated
Okay.
because I've been flying. And so in so many ways, I haven't even begun to mention, but in so many ways, we probably shouldn't even be recording today. But
Yet here we are.
Yet here we are, yes. And the reason that we're here is because we've got Brad Farris on the phone today.
Yes.
And Brad has appeared in a recent episode of the podcast, but today we want to talk about something a little bit different. And the thing that I want to go into today is that a couple weeks ago, Brad sent out an email. I'm on his email list, and he sent out an email. And in this email, there were 5 steps. Is that correct? I think the magic number was 5. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So there were 5 steps, 5 things that you can do if you're in the moments before a presentation or a meeting with someone or pretty much any communication event. If you're in the moments before a communication event, or if during the communication event you notice that things are going bad, what are some of the things that you can do to back up and fix the situation so it doesn't go completely bad? So that's what we're going to go into today.
Great.
And so that's why I wanted so badly, even though there are so many reasons that we should probably not be recording today, we've got Brad on the phone, and I really wanted to go into this topic. So, Brad, before we go into the topic, just for our guests who are hearing you for the first time.
Yes.
So tell them a little bit about who you are, and also tell them how they can get in touch with you.
Sure. I'm an executive and leadership coach in Chicago. I help typically founders of creative service firms to grow their leadership, and by doing so, to grow their business.
Okay.
My business is Anchor Advisors. You can find me at anchoradvisors.com. And if you wanted to join the email list that Matt was mentioning, if you go to anchoradvisors.com/conversation, there should be a form there for you to fill that out.
Excellent.
That could be one of
Okay.
the best links I have heard for an email list in a long time.
Yeah.
I try to frame the list not as like me communicating, but us having a conversation. So I'm having a conversation with the people on the list. And if you're on it, and Matt sees this, I ask people to reply back, and they do, because having a conversation is what this is all about. I don't want to just broadcast a bunch of stuff. I want to be in conversation with the audience.
I'm so stealing that idea right after this podcast.
Yeah, it's a great idea, and obviously I like it because not only is Brad sending out these great one-way emails, but actually, exactly like you just described, Brad, it turns into a two-way conversation. And here we are on the podcast today,
Exactly.
having a two-way conversation about something
That's
that
right.
you said in an email.
That's right.
So, okay, so anything else, or shall we get started?
No, let's roll. I want to hear about your train wreck in slow motion.
Yeah, train wreck in slow motion. Okay, so today, dear listeners, today I'm going to be our guinea pig, and Brad is going to give me some advice. So that's what we're doing here today. Matt is being the guinea pig. Brad is giving some advice, and the train wreck that we were describing, and Alper was present, so he witnessed the train wreck. This
Yes.
happens to me occasionally when I'm speaking, and it happened in 2019. So we're at a presentation in Bulgaria or Romania. We're at a presentation in Romania. And the train wreck is that in the couple seconds before I get up to give a speech, I don't know who's going to show up. Is it going to be the expansive Matt who is, communicative and articulate, and he's, making eye contact with all of his people, and like the world is great, the world is his oyster? Or is it going to be the Matt who's like can't find the words and stares at the floor and breaks into a nervous sweat, and then it just gets worse from there? And in the seconds before presentation, I don't know which one it's going to be. I can be like, in 2 seconds I'm going to open my mouth and I have no idea which Matt is going to show up. So where should I start, Brad? We want to troubleshoot this because I know this happens to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So where should I start in the troubleshooting process?
So there's two directions I could go here, and one is a little bit about preparation to reduce that feeling of I don't know who's going to show up.
Yeah,
I'd like to put a pin in that and come back to that, but instead just talk about in the moment some things that are going on. Does that work for you?
Sure, works for me. Go for it.
So in the moment, you open your mouth and words start coming out, and less resourceful Matt has shown up.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes.
What are you feeling in that moment? What's going on inside you?
I'm feeling like these people don't like me.
Yes.
What I have to say is too basic, and they're sitting there staring at me thinking this is a waste of time listening to this guy talk. That's what I'm thinking. That's what's going through my head in those initial seconds.
And in a different situation where expansive Matt showed up, what are the thoughts that are in your mind when that's happening?
Expansive Matt has a completely different way of seeing it. Expansive Matt is like, what I have to say, it might seem really basic to me because I've said it a gazillion times to a gazillion different people, but this is the first time that I've said it to them, to these people, and they really want to hear what it is. That's why they're here. That's why they're sitting here in these chairs in front of me, is that they want to hear the words that are about to come out of my mouth.
That's right. And so can you see the difference between those two thoughts? Where's the focus in less resourceful Matt?
Less resourceful Matt is focused on me and my fear.
That's right.
There is some of them in the focus, in that I'm thinking, they don't want to hear what I say, but in the end, it's all about me. And
that's right.
The words that are coming out of my mouth are not worth listening to.
That's right. And in the expansive Matt, where is the focus?
In the expansive Matt, the focus is on the audience. The focus is not on me at all. In fact, in expansive Matt, I barely even exist.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so this is something that I see a lot, is that when we're experiencing those kind of anxieties, and whether it's a speaking engagement where I'm sitting down to deliver a performance review, when we're starting to feel a lot of that anxiety or kind of negative self-talk, generally speaking, our focus is on ourselves. And it's not just on ourselves, it's really on a future version of ourselves in which we've delivered the talk and everyone thinks we stink, right? So it's not a present moment thought. That's a thought about the future, about something that hasn't happened yet. And so when you're in service, when you're focused on the audience, you're much more present. I'm here. The audience is here. I can't wait to see what is going to happen as I deliver this talk. And these people are here because they see what I have as valuable. And so in that moment, in the present moment, I see that expansive possibility. Does that make sense?
I'm just going to jump in for 1 second to make it easier for non-native English speakers like myself and our listeners. When you say expensive, we're not talking about the monetary value. We're talking about expensive with an A, right? Just to be clear.
Yes, that's right. Expansive with an A, right?
Okay.
And it's expansive meaning I'm filling up more space.
Yes.
I see possibilities. I'm looking forward to things that are gonna be good.
Okay, I got that in this third use of the word, I think, and I just wanted to be.
I appreciate that,
ambassador
Albert.
for
really
the
helpful
listeners.
because expansive and expensive do sound exactly the same, right?
You can be more expensive when you're more expensive.
That is absolutely true. You're going to be more expensive when you're more expensive.
Yeah. So, Brad, I've got a question in mind at this point, but before we dig into that question, what do you think? Should I dig a little more into the mindset of bad Matt? Is that what I should do?
I think if we stay with that for a minute, I think that because even if we do all of our preparation right, there are going to be times when the
Okay.
less resourceful Matt shows up. So let's stay with less resourceful Matt and kind of work through the 5 steps there, and then we can come back to
I
expand.
like your diplomatic
That's
phrasing.
such elegant diplomatic way of putting it.
You're like less resourceful Matt, whereas
Well,
I'm just bad Matt.
When we name Matt as bad, right? then we're anchoring ourselves in a place where that expansive part is not as available to us. But hey, I'm just in a less resourceful place here. I just need to move to a different place rather than
I like it.
I am bad, right? Kind of anchors us in that negative spot.
Okay, so I like your idea. I'm going to go with less resourceful Matt.
All right.
So what less resourceful Matt? Actually, you make a good point in that less resourceful Matt is all about Matt, because in the moments before I give a speech, there'll be a moment, no pun intended, a moment where I'm thinking, I don't know if they're going to like this or not. And when expansive Matt shows up, the answer is typically something like, I don't care.
So, sticking with that thought that they're not going to like this, what's going to happen if they don't like it? Like, you had a really terrible experience when you finished that talk. It was a complete disaster, as bad as you can imagine it. Did people throw rocks at you? Did they run you over with a car? Like, what happened in that moment? Yeah, what happened if they don't like it?
No, nobody throws rocks. Nobody throws rocks.
Yeah.
Nobody even throws rotten tomatoes. They just, they just move on. They lost all of 10 minutes of their life. It's like, okay, well, yeah, those are 10 minutes that I'm not going to get back, but at least I'm not dead. So nobody in the room,
that's a really important realization, right? Particularly in public speaking, where we're exposing ourselves and where there's this chance that people are going to judge us.
Yeah.
Part of our internal wiring says this is a life or death situation.
Yeah.
Right. But the fear that we generate is like fight or flight. And that's when you're staring at your shoes, when you can't think of the next word. What's happening is that fear is shutting down your prefrontal cortex. And you're getting like tunnel vision, right? Have you experienced that?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so that fear was designed that when we walked past a bush and there was a lion behind that bush, we would run like hell. Like, that's what that was for. But this is not a lion behind the bush situation. This is it's 10 minutes of our lives and everyone's going to forget about it, except apparently Alper and you who were at that talk. So noticing,
they probably all forgotten about it and moved on.
Yeah,
but here we are 5 years later. 5 years later, we're
still
5 years later. We're
still right, exactly. So noticing. Oh my gosh, there's that fear.
Okay,
but that fear, and I'm so glad that they have those nerves that keep me from stepping out in front of a car or doing things that are actually dangerous. But this is not actually a situation like that. And so you can use some cognitive tools to try to reduce that fear and back it down and say, this could go horribly. And if it goes horribly, it'll be a great story that I'll tell on a podcast 5 years from now.
Yeah. Okay. So where should we go from here? Should we back up to the
let's stay with this for a minute. The 5 steps. So that's step 2 of the 5 steps. The first one is awareness, and notice. The second is to identify the feeling or emotion. For you, that was fear, right? And then the third is to interrogate that and say, is it true? Like, is this a life or death situation? It is not, right?
Yeah. So you're saying that, I'm standing there in front of this crowd in Romania. Yep. And I realized that, what was the phrase you used? Less effective Matt?
Less resourceful Matt.
Less resourceful Matt is showing up. So you're saying, at this point, remind myself that no one's going to die. If I give a bad presentation, no one's going to die. Right. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Less resourceful Matt is the result of fear hijacking your brain and starting to take the blood away from your prefrontal cortex, the part that we use for reasoning and understanding. And it's limiting us. It's trying to give us tunnel vision. And so, no, brain. We don't need that. What we need is all of our brain here, right? And so, to actively kind of calming down your nervous system to say it's going to be okay. Like, if the worst thing happens, it turns into a great story that I tell on a podcast someday.
Okay. And so what should we do next?
Right. So when you get to that point, now you have
Uh-huh.
new choices, right?
Okay.
And
Uh-huh.
this might not be at the beginning of a talk. Maybe in the middle of a talk, you forget a piece, or you skip
Yeah.
something, or you realize that something is
Sure.
not as clear, right? And so you have that same kind of
Sure.
fear. If you
Yeah.
can calm that fear down, now you have new
Uh-huh.
choices, right?
Okay.
So now you can
Okay.
say, hey, audience, I just realized that I skipped a really important thing. I'm just going to go back and get that, right?
Uh-huh.
Or
Uh-huh.
you could say, you could decide to keep going and incorporate it later in the talk. Or you could stop and say, I just need a minute to figure something out, right? Like once
Okay.
you get that emotion out, it gives you a new range of choices, and then you can act in a different way. Does that make sense?
That's true. Yeah, because that's true. Because the things that you're describing require. I mean, they're easy to do if you're feeling confident and in control, and they're virtually
Yeah,
impossible to do if you are in this tunnel vision mindset.
that's right.
Okay.
So let's talk about how we show up as the person who's confident and in control. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. Let's go
So
for it.
so in the moments before you're coming on stage, or even in the hour before you're coming on stage,
Yeah.
being very grounded and present. So what does present mean? Present means that I'm not in the past and I'm not in the future, right? So you could be
Okay.
walking
Okay.
up on stage and thinking, "Oh my gosh, this is just going to be could be just like Bulgaria in 2019."
uh,
Right? Now you're in the past, and that is not helping you.
okay.
Right?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Or you could be thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to kill this presentation. And when I'm done, I'm going to take myself out for dinner and I'm going to have a nice scotch. That's
Uh,
also not actually helping you, right? Because what you need is to have all of your brain right here in the
okay.
moment that you're having this performance.
Wait. Back up a second, because I heard the phrase "have a nice scotch,"
Yeah,
and I immediately associated that with good stuff,
it is
and
good
then
stuff.
here you are saying that no, this is not the place to be. So
Right.
say that part again.
So if I'm up on stage and I'm delivering a presentation, or if I'm
Uh
sitting in front of an employee delivering a performance review, if
huh.
any part of my brain is thinking about something else, like should I have the
Okay.
Macallan or should I go with the Lagavulin, right? That's
Uh,
that that's part of your brain that is not available for you to have the conversation that you're in right now.
good point. Good point.
And so any part of me that is not present is not there to serve the situation that I'm in. So I'm going to, as much as I can, become present to the current situation that I'm in.
Okay.
And I do that by first kind of unraveling those. Okay, I'm not thinking about Bulgaria in 2019, and I'm not thinking about dinner tonight. And instead, I want to be in my body. So I want to feel my feet on the floor. I
Okay.
usually try to stand up sort of straight so that I can feel my
Uh,
body and take a
okay.
few deep breaths where I'm just in my body and present with what's happening right here and right now.
Okay. Uh huh. Okay.
So that's the first step in preparation, is to get present.
Okay. Okay.
The second, which you talked about when you were talking about expansive, Matt, is to think about service. Man,
Okay.
there's 200 people who are here today to hear what I have to say, and I
Yeah.
can't wait to see how they respond to this material. This is going to
Okay.
be really fascinating to watch
Okay.
what they're doing. And there's two things going on there, right? And so we're staying present, we're observing the audience. Observing the audience is another way of staying present. When I'm observing, when I'm looking, I can't be thinking about the past or the future. I'm right here with them. Does that make sense?
A couple things about what you just said strike me. One is that, back up a second. You were when you first started talking about the steps to becoming present.
Yes.
They're very physical. It's like stand up straight, breathe deep, feel your feet planted on the ground. These are very physical things. They're not
Yes.
just, for lack of a better word, they're not, mental processes. They're
Right.
very physical things that you
That's
need
right.
to do. And then and another thing that you mentioned that struck me as very interesting is that you were talking about imagining what is the audience doing in their lives, what is going on in their lives that makes them want to hear what I'm about to say. Not just, they're here in the room. This is all about the audience. Make sure they're looking at you and not scrolling through Facebook, blah, blah, blah. Not just that, but just imagine what's going on in their lives that causes them to want to hear what you're about to say. So let's dig into that a little bit more.
Sure.
Tell me what I should be thinking about at this point.
So that physical grounding is about helping you to be in the present, right? When we're connected to our body, it helps us to be in the present. The other thing, if we look at the audience, and we look at the people that are actually there, it's our observational brain is also connected to our emotions. And so when we're looking carefully for something, it actually turns our emotions down. So we don't feel our emotions when we're observing.
True.
So by
good point.
looking,
Good point.
Yeah, it's like when you're playing sports and you're tracking the ball, you're not scared, you're not happy, you're focused on tracking that ball. It's the same idea with the audience. If we can be focused on them, then we're more still from an emotional perspective.
Now, good point. Good point.
The second part that you mentioned is how do we what are we thinking about them? And what I'm thinking about them is about service. I am here to serve them. And so to that extent, if I can really get into the mindset of service, it doesn't really matter if I look foolish or silly, as long as they're getting something out of the talk. If they move, if they change, if they hear something they've never heard before, then I did my job. And so when I'm focused on them, it kind of takes away from that self-centered fear that we can end up with, the stage fright.
Okay. And at this point, let's take a moment. And Brad and I have been hogging the conversation very much. Alper has been cut out of the conversation, basically. So Alper, let me open up the floor to you. At this point, do you have any questions that you would like to ask Brad?
I'm perfectly fine. By the way, I'm not cut out at all because you have been this selected guinea pig for this podcast. But yes. I have gone through every single moment, if not worse ones in my life, and I am taking these advices from Brad in a very appreciative manner because I'm going to use them a lot.
Can I ask you a question, Alper?
Sure.
As you're listening to those, are there ones that feel like they would be easier to put into practice and other ones that feel like they would be more challenging? Like where are things resonating and where are things still stuck?
Well, as a disclaimer, I'm a people pleaser in recovery. So
okay.
some of them are more difficult to utilize without thinking. But I think I'm at the point where I know that I'm not going to be stoned or thrown tomatoes at, and it's not going to be a life or death situation.
Yes.
The worst, I mean, that this is some of the advice that we have dispensed on this podcast as well. The worst that can happen is not as bad as you think.
That's right.
And I think I have internalized that.
Yeah.
But the last part you mentioned, for me, is like gold. I'm there to serve. And if I can dispense one tiny thing that one person can make use of in his or her life, then this whole gathering was not for nothing.
That's right.
So I think, like I said, as a people pleaser in recovery, I started as, okay, if there are 200 people in the room, all of them one by one should feel that.
Yeah.
Then that number went down to, okay, if half of it feels that, then that number, long story short, at the moment I'm thinking, okay, if one person, no matter how many there are in the room, could benefit from one piece of information, this is good. This is good enough.
And you know what's really valuable about that is that when we narrow our focus to trying to connect with just one person, we're so much more authentic. We're so much more present to whoever that one person is, that everybody gets the benefit of that. If instead we're trying to connect with 200 people, then everybody sees that they're not being connected with 99.5% of the time, right?
Exactly.
And so by focusing on just being with one person, everybody gets the benefit of that.
Yeah. And
so
to answer your question, I think, at least for me, that would be among the 5 steps, that would be the hardest one to implement. But I would say once you make progress in that, then everything becomes much more easier.
I agree. Yeah.
So Alper, we don't want to keep Brad here all day long.
I do.
So we want to.
I don't mind.
Actually, I do too. But just out of courtesy to Brad, so we don't want to keep Brad tied up all day long. So before we wrap up, Brad, have we skipped over any of the points that you wanted to mention?
I mean, just to reiterate, the 5
that would be great. The 5 points, that would be
the 5
great.
points in emotional regulation are first to notice, and noticing is actually harder than it sounds. Like there are a lot of times that we get emotionally hijacked, and it's 10 or 15 minutes before we realize, oh my gosh, my brain is functioning poorly. I'm in the non-resourceful version, right? So first is notice. Second, identify what's going on. What's the emotion that I'm feeling, right? Once you see what's happening, then you can interrogate it. Is that emotion true? Is the thing that's going on there real, right?
Yeah.
And on stage, this all has to happen very quickly. But because we've had this conversation, you're already primed to say, oh, wait, yeah, nothing terrible is going to happen, right? We've already put that in our minds, so we can get there relatively quickly. Once we can see that we're not going to die, then new options are available to us. And so we evaluate the options we have, and then we take action on whatever new option becomes available. So those are the 5 kind of steps for emotional regulation.
Okay, excellent.
And then if we wanted to recap, like the preparing for a high stakes conversation, getting grounded, being in our body, being present, getting rid of the past and future thoughts, right? And then to the extent that we can, be in service. You know, even in a performance evaluation, we're there because we want that person's performance to improve. It's not about us, it's about them. And so what can we do to get into that service mindset? And while we're doing that, how do we observe and connect with at least one person in the audience?
And
Brad, with that, you just triggered a desire in me to call you for another episode to talk about the service mindset, because I think it would be something that deserves its own conversation, if you don't mind.
We could definitely do that.
Yeah.
I would also love to hear Brad talk more about the service mindset. But we've got to wrap things up for today. And before we wrap things up, I just wanted to call attention to something that we discussed it earlier, but in Brad's recap here, he mentioned it. And that is that during this preparation process, don't forget the physical stuff. It's very easy to get tied up in the mental stuff that you have to do and to be an expert on those mental things, but don't forget the physical stuff. You know, they might be very simple, but they're extremely important. Stand up straight, breathe deep, plant your feet on the ground, stuff like that. And I, by nature, am, you know, if I hear somebody talking about the physical aspects of preparation, by nature, I'll kind of discount that and think, yeah, but this is great advice that Brad is giving here. So as we wrap up here, I just wanted to thank you again, Brad, for joining us today.
I'm glad to be here. I always enjoy conversations with you guys.
Excellent. It was. I can't even begin to tell you how much of a pleasure it was to have you with us today. So thank you very much, Brad.
Absolutely.
And Alper, so I will see you next week then.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
All right. Talk to you later. Thanks, Brad. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The White Rabbit with Matt Krause and Alper Rosanes. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or through your favorite feed.